Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram language design review, part of our incremental language development series. And we have a few topics. Underlighted.
Yes, so this is a new symbol for the next Wolfram language version. It actually came up in LCC discussion, but we implemented it and wanted to look at it here. And coincidentally, the agenda item is underlighted itself. So we will be adding that to the spelling dictionary, but I was a little tickled by it. So there's a futurized ref page. There's an implementation that's in the builds now, but the latest builds are still running. So the initialization section at the bottom of this section will make it work in this notebook for you.
I don't quite understand the, I mean, this is like an error looking thing. So does underlighted have a second argument that determines how the underlighting is happening?
Yep. So by default,
has the color.
Yeah, it has the color. So by default, it uses the same underlighting color.
Who do we have here? Do we have people from the front end team here?
We didn't specifically bring anyone in since we'd already gone over this in LCC, but
we decided that this, I mean, because to me, it's like this error squiggle. I mean, I don't know whether that's the standard meaning of the term underlighting.
Well, that's the name of the font variation, right? So
with a squiggle or with just a
it's right, the option right, it's do style of foo comma font variations goes to, I think it's underlight goes to red
color.
or something. Does the
so wait a minute, who made up that term?
I mean, the point being that underlighted is not the same thing as underlined.
Correct.
Right.
But highlighted it's lit, and I mean, if I go look up underlight on the web, it's all about things that aren't bright enough or putting lights underneath. I mean, it just doesn't. There's not a single thing I'm seeing in pages and pages here. It's all about chandeliers with underlighting, underlight angler, some kind of where did this word come from for us?
Came from the LCC meeting.
Well, it came from, I mean, it came from the name of the font variation. Now, if and you did not object to it, and you did not object to it previously, so we didn't think this would be something we needed to discuss. Well, I mean,
so
if you want us to discuss it, we can. I guess
because I think it's
tomorrow's LCC.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Let me just look at something here. So, what I'm seeing in my archive was introduced by us in 2016 in internal discussions.
Okay.
But it just seems to have just appeared there. It mostly seems to be in particular progress reports. I mean, I think John Fultz may have invented this.
It's entirely possible.
Well, let's look at the design independent of the name. Okay. I mean, it's an interesting name. I'm just not sure it's correct. Okay, so you've got a color there.
Yep.
See, I don't quite understand. I mean, when we have like overscript, for example, overscript takes a second argument that is the actual thing that you will overscript with.
Right, saying? Because this is a font variation. This is not a thing.
Well, that's why it has an ED at the end.
Yeah, I mean, the original context of where this came up and where it was proposed was looking at the different font variations that exist in style.
By the way, this is so wrong what happens here. This should by default be a spanning character, surely.
Not I believe it wants to be a normal dash, not an underscore.
Oh. Nope.
Okay, all right, maybe there's a little buglet there, but there is something that should work there.
There is overbar.
Pathetic.
There is overbar too.
Well, okay, so you're saying overbar.
Yeah.
That's better. But
Right.
look at the pathetic documentation of overscript. Yet another example of this.
What makes it pathetic?
There's only one example. It doesn't show you how to use the spanning character stuff or anything. And where's the link to overbar? Okay, so somebody should add that.
I can pass that along.
As the first link. It's very badly documented. Okay. In any case,
so at the box level, if you did an overscript box, yeah, I mean, if you look at the boxes of overbar, it's overscript box of X comma underscore. So at the box level, but I guess.
Okay, so something went wrong and who knows what happened with the overscript thing. That's a separate discussion, maybe for an LCC meeting. But right now, the issue here is this is a pure color. I mean, you know, the more consistent things
because
do.
it's like small caps. I mean, right there aren't multiple things that can be done here. This is specifically to get, you wanted a function to give you a way to do the squiggly lines that you get from spelling.
I understand, but those squigglies are not, if I understand correctly, that thing. Oh, so this, I'm so confused here. Okay, if I were to say style of text, comma, bold.
Right, so this is one of the questions of whether it should be preserved on input or not. So highlight doesn't, as you can see, highlighted doesn't. I wasn't sure that and Nick chose to model underlighted on highlighted. I'm skeptical of that decision.
Look, this was intended to be used for things like code assistance. And it's mainstreaming the UI for code assistance.
Well, then that would be an argument for it evaluating away, just like highlighted. Because then that means that you could actually replace, you could modify a person's notebook, their actual input cell to have this without breaking it.
I agree. It's a good argument for that. If highlighted does it, this should do it too. But I'm a little bit confused. Overbar is a typesetting construct, you're saying.
Correct. So if you did / input form on that one, then right, you'd see overbar of blah. Yeah, and for that matter, if you did style of foo, comma, font variations goes to underlight goes to red.
I mean, let's just do. Oops. Oh God, how do I get back? This is another thing that's just wrong.
Command
See, I'm in this position. I should get that raft again.
Command K.
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to complain instead.
All right. Well, but
Okay,
once
so
you want
Avery,
to continue with the meeting, once you want to continue with the meeting, you can hit Command K.
Yeah. Okay. Can you screen cap this case?
Yep, I got it.
And make sure that it's understood for user assistance. This is one of these things that should be.
I mean, I don't know that that's obvious because every time you cursor through something, having that flash.
Yeah, I understand. But
I'll save that discussion for a different
meeting, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so this is that. And now if I take this and I copy this and I use it, it's still there.
Right. And if you change that strike through goes to true to, underlight goes to red, you'll have the same behavior.
Okay. So
Right.
what's your point? So this is now something.
Right. So if you copy that out and use that as input, it will still be there. So I'm just pointing out that,
I don't understand how it's still there. What is it still? What is that in input form?
It's style. It's exactly what you typed in.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Right. So I'm just pointing out that that's a difference between, and maybe you'll argue this is a good difference between underlighted and just using style.
You know what?
But
I don't think we can have this discussion without the front end folk like John, for example. I really don't think it's a good idea. So if we can find John,
we'll move this tomorrow. We'll do this tomorrow in LCC then.
Okay.
With John.
Yep.
Actually, just one other quick question though is maybe there should be a generalization of all of these, highlighted as well, where it's just a version of style that goes away when you evaluate it.
Like styled or something like this.
Maybe I don't know, but it seems
So
like
there
if we're introducing another,
there is a way to do that with style, which is if you say strip on input goes to true, there's an option to make style fade away, which is strip on input goes to true.
Oh, but that's probably all you need. Because I mean, I think this is not something that, this is not a common case. Like this is something where it's like deep in your weird code annotation tool is going to use this. So yeah.
Right. I use it when I'm writing low level make boxes rules. I don't generally use it in, just typing into a notebook.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Can we go on here then? Who do we have here who's relevant to this? We don't have Michael here. We don't have
Michael's joining in.
Okay. Okay. So what's the issue here?
So the issue is in alpha in the knowledge base, we have some entities have references, and basically for every entity type, we have to reinvent a different way.
We don't want to do. We know that.
Right.
I mean, but
and just to be very clear,
is Michael joining? We kind of need Michael for this discussion. He's not joining. We should not do that right now.
Yeah, he should be joining. I pinged him. He said to let him know when we were talking about this.
Okay. Let's go on and we'll come back to this. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. LevelMap.
So this was originally something we talked about last year. It was a Wolfram function repository submission from Seth Chandler, and we said it's effectively an operator form of map with a level spec. And we had kind of been on the fence about whether it was something that warranted being a system function.
In fact, we decided no, is my recollection of that. But then Seth sent in some additional items about this.
Okay.
So
okay. So what was the issue here is I agree that an operator form of map with levels would be nice.
Map thread too?
This thread. Doesn't thread have a one argument form? I guess not.
No, I'm just saying, and map indexed, and are we going to have level spec versions of all the map functions?
I see.
Well, I mean, supplied is a new story for indexed. And I don't know how supplied works with operator forms.
Well, it has nothing to do with thread, though.
And we do have Michael here, by the way.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I think, well, I guess there are a couple of different issues. One, right, because there's one issue of, do we want an operator form of map that takes a level spec, which
I certainly would have found useful a bunch of times. But whether this is the right way to do that, I'm not sure. Or whether what we want to do instead is to have a headdress for the thing inside map or something, or a headdress for the map itself that says, I mean, is there a conceivable way to headdress the map to make it? I mean, I don't know how successful things like reverse applied, operator applied, things like that. I mean, I use them occasionally. I have to say I've not used them as much as I would have liked to.
I mean, I think operator applied is very useful, but the syntax can get complicated. This, again, the implementation of map level here basically uses curry, where it could use operator applied, but doing it for arbitrary functions can get complicated, and readability is compromised.
Right, but the main issue is, map F onto blah, 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 something one wants to do. One also wants to map, this is something one wants to do as well.
Yep.
And by the way, it's not totally obvious, okay, that type of thing. And the question is, can one imagine doing, can one imagine having something which is a more compact form of this without having to create the explicit anonymous function? And I don't really see how that works, because you've got to get inside the map to tell it you're operating at level 2.
It's not what's wrong with making an anonymous function? I mean, you have to somewhere tell it where the argument is going to go in.
Yeah.
And it's just one additional character after that.
I mean, I actually agree with Christopher on this point, but I will, for the sake of playing devil's advocate, I suppose we could think of, could imagine something like leveled or at level or something, which takes 2 arguments, one of which is an operator form, and the second is a level spec. And when you apply that, but I'm not sure how general that would be. Yeah.
How could that work?
Well, it could take apart the left-hand side, right? You could say, oh, I know this, it's a map. But if you gave it a generalized function, there's nothing it could do.
Yeah.
But that's already, if we're playing character counting, this is more characters.
I can see, right.
And probably less readable.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the only thing that is awkward about this is the ampersand at the end, but I don't see, I mean, we could invent yet another notation for function.
Well, I think there is something we talked about in one of these meetings a bit ago, which was having a match fix, or whatever you would call it, version of function, like some fancy bracket.
Yes.
The argument being that basically I mean, really the only reason why function, pure functions are often a little bit annoying is the fact that they have weird precedents, and they unavoidably have weird precedents. And even when we make prefix versions of pure functions, they also have weird unavoidable precedents.
Right. But if it was match fix, it wouldn't have that.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I think that's a reasonable thing. Didn't we did talk about that before, and we had some ideas for what it might look like.
Right. I don't remember if this was, I think the issues were we weren't sure what the ASCII form, and I'm not sure we settled on what the typeset form.
Okay, well, why don't we
like,
bring back that issue? Because I think that's a reasonable thing to discuss.
Okay.
And I think also we could, within that form, we could have some nice immediate display for the hash sign, which would make it, anyway, I think we can do well there. All right, let's come back to bibliographic references. Okay, what are the issues here?
So the issues are these two sections of kind of differing entity types that handle references in different ways.
Different entity types. Well, I mean, we already discussed a bunch of this last time, didn't we?
Well, not really, because we need to separate two issues. There's citations, which is, a hyperlink or a little bracket one. And then there's the actual reference, which is the thing that contains the data and wants to be in some symbolic form that can be processed and unified across all of the entities. So we want to talk about that second thing, because last time we got sidetracked by the first thing.
Hold on. So the issue is, for example, I should be able to give a random citation from that I got from some paper from 1922 or something, in some, ZNAT A7 paren 1914 6 or something, and I should be able to translate that into a beautiful modern citation form and do that through an external service. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about the external service, but I was thinking one of the ideas that we suggested was having an interpreter be able to eat a string and return one of these things.
Right. The
the
point
right
is,
Michael?
we want to have a symbolic representation of the data.
Right.
Right. But and then there's two stages. There's take the raw, I got this random citation from place X, turn it into our nice symbolic representation, and there's render our symbolic representation as a, whatever it is, APA style reference or something. Is that correct?
Right, and in particular, as the reference as what appears in the bibliography, completely ignoring hyperlinks, footnotes, endnotes, right? Just the complete entry that would appear.
Hold on. That's a completely separate thing. The question of how things float on pages and where they get citations inside a notebook and so on, that's completely separate from this.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, fine.
We want to ignore that, and just the thing at, wherever the complete data appears, that's the formatting we want to talk about.
Okay, but okay. Look, to me, there is a function that takes, just like export, takes, the string that is the APA citation or whatever they are called, okay, is like an export of the symbolic object. Am I making sense? I mean, it's not the print form of the symbolic object, probably. It's the export of that to, X kind of wacky citation format. Am I making sense?
Right. I think we want to have an interface, like you said, to APA or to Library of Congress or however we're doing the citations. That's going to be a common operation is going out and alternatively coming in. And then
exactly.
I think what Ian is trying to focus on is what the middle layer is, which is our formal symbolic representation of a citation, which I think is under.
But I thought we had a bunch of things. I mean, there are these standard things that librarians talk about, whether it's, Dublin Core or some of these other things. There's a standard set of fields, aren't there?
It depends on the reference, right? Like we had talked about.
No, there's a standard set of fields that people fill in. And for any given reference, some of those fields might be blank. For example, there might be a field that says the location of the thing. Like if it's a book that is the unique copy of the, you know, the Gutenberg Bible or something. No, that's a printed thing again. The I don't know, the Rosetta Stone. Okay, how do you reference the Rosetta Stone? It's a unique thing. It's sitting in the British Museum, presumably. Am I making sense? And that is a thing where most references to books will not have a location because, well, the books can be all sorts of places.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there are, and by the way, for the archive system project that we started, it has similar kinds of things. Has similar, you know, there is this box. It might be a physical box that sits in a particular place. It might be a virtual box. It might, in the case of something like that, it might also have various kinds of access controls that might be recorded in its record. And so the basic point is there is a standard set of things that you will put into one of these records. Some of them are more sensible than others. You know, look, I mean, this is a standard thing, the Dublin core, you know, we know about these, right?
Oh, Dublin. Okay, I thought you were saying doubling core, and I was very confused by that. What core was being multiplied by 2? I'm not familiar with this, but
okay, well, I mean, you know, right statements, provenance statement, there are all kinds of things here. This is a you know, it's got all kinds of stuff.
Right. And I could effectively see this being analogous with what we have in person data, where there's a superset of properties, many of which do not apply to certain people.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, there's a somewhat finite set, and there may be, you know, miscellaneous fields that can be.
Right. I don't see why we shouldn't just define a bunch of things and try and standardize. You know, whereas I think let's see.
All right. Well, what would the head be? What would the structure be? Just
I think it's just an association with these. I mean, so for BibTech, I don't know, this is a good example, but I don't know how many what standard fields there are, and are they, how standardized are they? Author, title, whatever. Am I making sense?
There's 13 publication types and then a miscellaneous type, and there are keys.
So they've canonicalized that. So Dublin core, I think, is floppier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are some other ones. Let's see.
By the way, I think there's some hair-splitting distinction between BibTech and BibLaTeX, which is the newer thing.
Christopher, do you know if they both use the same .bib format, or?
They both have .bib files. I believe they use different formats. Like they have incompatible .bib files, if I remember right.
Okay, well, so have we studied these? I mean,
I'm familiar with like APA and MLA, like high school, basically.
I know, like I mean, Zotero is very popular. It's sort of similar in that it has a bunch of fields and then it has sort of miscellaneous fields, I think, that you can add.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see on the right there.
Right, publication, there we go. Location and archive. Right, so, I mean, presumably what we need is just somebody needs to go and do the work of inventorying all these fields, and we need to have reasonable canonical names for them. Journal abbreviation, DOI, location and archive, library catalog, call number, etc., etc., etc. Right?
Makes sense.
And let's just get a nice list of them, and we'll overgenerate it, and many things will not have most of them filled out. And then our goal is to be able to go from a raw textual reference through either probably mostly an external API to fill that in, or for example, being able to go from a DOI to a filled in, citation. Makes sense?
Yep.
And once we have that, then there's a question of, well, I don't know so what is that going to be called? What are we going to have as that object? Bibliographic. Did we not have a name for that? The thing that contains the association.
Thing that takes the DOI or whatever, or the container.
Well, no, I'm saying that the output thing that is the association of citation information, will that have a wrapper like bibliographic object or something?
I'm suggesting bibliographical reference for that as the wrapper. That's a good name.
I wouldn't.
It's
I
in
don't
this
think we
section,
need
just
an
slightly
AL.
above this.
I think ALs have died with Victorian period.
Under basic proposal.
I think it should just be.
Yeah, bibliographical doesn't feel natural for me to say at all, but I was matching certain menu items we have that use bibliographical.
I wouldn't worry about it. Those menu items were created 35 years ago, and the menu items are easy to change.
Yeah. My preference is just bibliographic.
Right.
And I think something, maybe this is a discussion when we're looking at citations specifically, but that creating bibliographic references, it might be nice if there were a code assist form for templates to say, I have a book and it can pre-populate the basic fields that I'm interested in, or I have a journal article. If we have 1,000, probably not 1,000, but somewhere around 100 potential keys, it might be nice for there to be some assistance in populating common ones for common.
Well, that's right. That is a code assistance issue.
Okay.
Right. I know you said these don't want print forms, but I wonder if we shouldn't have a second argument, which is how to format, and then it does have.
I kind of agree. I'm kind of thinking of that. Yeah. I mean, the way I would see it is if you give, I would say if you said bibliographic reference, I don't know, no, and fizz.
Like automatic interpretation.
Yeah, that it would just turn that into, that it would potentially call an API and try and turn that into its canonical symbolic form. And then, and then the other thing would be that, comma, I don't know, some format identifier that could just be APA, or it could be much like we have date string, have a format identifier as a second argument. We could have a format identifier here that has certain elements, and you could say, put these in this form. Does that make some sense? Just like if I'm not mistaken, in date string, you can give it, you just list the things you want. So similarly here, you can say, list title, blah, 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 blah.
And there's some analogy with date object, which can take the same elements to typeset, and it also carries that to the point where you go to export it. So if you have a date object and say date format goes to ISO date time, it will print with ISO date time. And when you go to serialize it as a string, it will remember that format.
Okay.
So if you were going to, typeset bibliographic reference in APA, and then you went to export it, and it said it was tagged as APA, it could default to exporting in whatever the APA format is versus the MLA versus Chicago Manual of Style, etc.
Right. Okay, well, do we think we have a plan here? And okay, so we're going to inventory possible tags to be used. Let's write down what the sources are, who's using what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then let's understand. I mean, I don't know whether this is going to be an API story, a story of, I don't know whether the converters are accessible from some other, I don't know what Zotero, I don't know what it is exactly, whether it's a library we can use, etc. We don't want to be coding every one of these ourselves if we can help it. And it might be nice, we've just done a bunch of bibliographic citation things for various things of mine that were formatted. I don't know exactly who formatted them. I think Ariana did some, Paige did some, not sure who all has worked on them. But those were, I gave a messy reference, they cleaned them up and put them in a standard format. Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. They'd certainly be good test cases to look at when we think we have something that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can look at from the messy reference to, I'm not even sure, those references, I think they were complete references, but just in totally scrambled formats and totally inconsistent formats. Okay, what else do we have to discuss here? Michael, do you want to raise some things?
Michael, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm seeing him unmute, but I'm not hearing anything.
Hello?
Hello there.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Don't know what it was. Okay. No, I think that sounds like a good plan.
Okay, so we only need one symbol here, bibliographic reference, and we will have.
And we need one symbol to fill it in.
What do you mean by that?
What you just said, you have the dirty one and you get a nice one out.
Right, but I think what the idea is, it's a self-filling thing. You type bibliographic reference to the dirty thing, and it comes out with a symbolic thing with a default format.
This, I think I would not like.
What do you want to do?
Self-filling. I would rather have a function to do it. Because if I have 10,000 of them, this will take weeks to make the Service Connect calls.
Well, that's a different issue. I mean, look, there's a separate issue, which is to have these in cells in a notebook and have some automation that lets you type them into a cell in a notebook and say, this is a bibliographic cell, and then have it do the right thing. But that relates to the whole citation thing and footnoting and so on. I suggest that we try to build this. Go ahead.
But say, like, if I have an integral that I don't want to be integrated, I inactivate it. It feels odd to me to inactivate a bibliographic reference, just to avoid that it evaluates.
Well,
I'm in the airplane and write something. It cannot even evaluate.
Could we make it that if it sees an association, it doesn't do anything, but if it sees a string, it goes somewhere to try to populate that association?
Sure. Once it's an association, it's done, so to speak. It's going to assume it's in canonical form.
Okay.
Well, you're saying it still needs activation. If the association is partially filled out and you want to fill out DOIs and things like that in the association.
Actually, the reverse. I think what one always has today at one's disposal is the DOI, and I want the title to be later.
Right. I wanted to ask: is the function that takes a string and gives a reference a different function from the thing that takes an external identifier and returns a reference?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Because presumably with the string, you could make something that's a reference without needing to look up to see if it's a real reference. Like if it kind of looks like it has the proper form of a reference, you could say, I think this is the author, this is the title.
I think we have to start building this. I don't think we know what's going to happen until we start building this, until we know what these Service Connect things are going to be like, and so on. I suggest we start building it like this and see what it's like.
I mean, we do have the Crossref Service Connect, which probably does everything that has a DOI.
Okay.
With rare exceptions.
Okay. But again, you know, if you say bibliographic reference of a string that is a DOI, it probably should recognize that. I mean, you could also give an explicit external identifier that is a DOI.
Yes.
Okay. All right. What else do we have to talk about here? I think we should start building something here. And it would be good to at least, I mean, I think Bob S. was, like several years ago now, working on the archive system. And we had a similar kind of concept there, which has been partially built. It will be good to communicate with him.
Okay, yeah, we'll follow up with Bob.
The resource system does have source metadata, which we just have an association of things like this, but we could integrate something like this into that as well.
How does this relate to the resource system? Because, for example, we definitely want a random function repository entry to have a bibliographic reference. So, for example, if you give a bibliographic reference and then you feed it a resource object, it should probably make the bibliographic reference for the resource object. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we could probably make that work.
Okay. And similarly, if you say bibliographic reference of a URL, it should probably make a you know, a comma APA or something. It should make the standard kind of you know, it should make a citation-like form of the URL. Now, a thing which I admit is bothering me is that in some of these cases, back to Michael's point, I wouldn't mind storing in my original document what I originally typed in for the bibliographic reference. Do I want that? Well, I mean, look, what the heck? Why don't we just put it in the association? The original thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Have a key that is original input or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's strings, there shouldn't be an issue with that.
I don't see a problem with that. I mean,
similar to how there's like an abbreviated name for the journal and a full name for a journal.
Yeah, I think the only potential conflict would be if you have two bibliographic references that are referencing the same item, but they had different inputs, and you said, are they same queue? But are you going to do that? Yeah.
I mean, I think that well, okay, so that is actually that's not such a tough luck type situation. That's a reasonable issue because you want to merge them in a bibliography. That's a reasonable issue. I think we're going to learn a bunch of these things. We actually have to start building this. We're not going to learn much until we start building it and start using it. And I am still unclear whether, Michael, do you have a thought? If we did have two functions, what would they look like? That one
I would be even fine with normal doing the job.
Of what? Of turning it into an association?
Yeah.
No, that's not what normal is for.
No, because
I knew you would like this.
So I mean the thing is, there's a high cost action, which is going from the scribbled form to the canonical form.
Right.
And what's an example of a place like that? See, I mean, the analog of that we have is control equals interpreter.
We have like formula lookup for formula data or to entity for different canonical forms.
Well, so this might be bibliographic lookup.
We also have dictionary.
Lookup. What's that?
We also have dictionary lookup. So
Yeah,
there's a
indeed.
pattern there.
Right. I mean, so if we had bibliographic lookup, which would not be a crazy thing to have, I have to say, I wonder whether we should bib it, so to speak. I mean, you know, we've got some other things like geo where we're not. I mean, I'm kind of wondering if it should go down to that.
Bib reference.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't like using abbreviations unless they are standard, you know, anyway, all right, but it doesn't, for now, bibliographic lookup then would go from a raw form to an inert bibliographic reference. A bibliographic reference would be the inert object that could be wrapped in another bibliographic reference with a different APA. It will be an inert object, like date object is an inert object. I mean, well,
inert in which sense?
It wouldn't be doing the lookup. The lookup would already been done.
Okay.
The resolution would already been done.
It's strictly a container at that point. It's not a constructor.
Right. And then, but it is a formatter in the sense that if you give it, you know, if you wrap another bibliographic reference with a different format specification, it would reformat itself. Just as I assume date object, if you wrap around it something with a different date specification, it will do the same kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, it'll do conversion.
I'm actually kind of preferring this because in the case of, you know, a raw notebook, you can have something where you say, you know, you give the source and then you say bibliographic reference sorry, yeah, I mean, sorry, you give the source and then you have some actual action in the notebook that says, go look up all these bibliographic sources and convert them to canonical references. All right, I think we have a path there.
Yep.
And I don't know about a service connect to Zotero.
Yeah, we'll look at the different services and see what's reasonable to connect into.
Fine. Okay.
I think this could be called Biblio rather than Bib. Biblio.
Possibly.
Yeah. Biblio reference.
Mm-hmm. It's removing the graphic like we do in Geo.
I see. Let's see. What is the term for, yeah, there's like bibliometrics and so on. Yeah, so biblio becomes, in a very Greek way, a precursor.
Yeah, and it's easier to pronounce than Bib.
Right. Yeah, it seems reasonable to me. Biblio then becomes the prefix for all things. So biblio lookup, biblio reference. Seems nice to me. All right, I think it's time to move on here. Good. Anything else for right now today?
Nope. Yeah, we'll revisit the level map stuff when we think about a general framework for function markup.
Right. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. See you later, guys. Okay.